with it being, the end of the season, and I don't know, I don't think we talked draft last time.
No, we didn't.
I think may have been another guest I had on the show, but this isn't a draft question about any prospects, so don't worry. I don't know, like if you've gone into
Not yet, but I'm going to.
Top 10. I have,
I'm going
and this is a question that I've asked every guest that I've had on the show so far this season. Are you keeping or trading the draft pick this year, depending on where it lands?
Trading it. I don't care where it is. Get me some damn good players on this team. Like I truly believe. I've always kind of thought of, again, if you get that number one pick and you call a team like Brooklyn, who I think is going to make an organizational shift, like I think Mikal Bridges for the number one overall pick is doable, and it makes sense. It makes sense for both sides, and that's something I've been just like eyeing. I've been hoping for. We'll see, but regardless if this is a top 5 pick or whatever it ends up being, I think you trade it. Again, it goes back to the point we had earlier. No more projects. Like if you really like a guy, I trust Troy Weaver's drafting ability. I will always give him that. I do trust his drafting ability to find somebody that can be useful. But I think that the pick serves more value as a trade asset because, again, we have 6 young guys that we can internally develop. And not that they're the best 6 prospects ever, but they're a very nice collection of prospects. So to me, the Pistons don't necessarily need to acquire another young guy unless it perfectly makes sense. If it does, then hey, take it. But in my eyes, from what I know of the draft plus where I believe this team is at, I just would rather, especially with no star free agents really that you really want, like that number one pick, use your cap space via trade. That number one pick or that top 5 pick or whatever can get you some pretty good. It can either get you a borderline all-star maybe, or it can get you 2 or 3 quality starters. And then, your team is a lot better. So I'm team trade the pick almost no matter what. I don't really see a scenario in which I would want to keep the pick.
Yeah, so right now, if you are following the NBA draft, if you look down, the Pistons are currently sitting at the second worst odds in the NBA draft. The Washington Wizards have one more loss than the Pistons. Historically, the team that finishes with the second worst record, as of the last 5 years, they've won the NBA draft lottery.
Oh wow!
So the Pistons are sitting at number 2, and they're mocked to take a forward of France, who I know people they hear France like, oh, another Killian Hayes. He's not a Killian Hayes. I think if they have a top 3 pick, they keep it. That's just me, because if you look in this draft, and I know, some people may disagree, there are some very talented small forwards in this draft that you could pair with Asar Thompson. There are some very talented small forwards. Like one guy that I keep coming back to, because I see a lot of Jaden McDaniels in his game, is Cody Williams, the brother of he plays in OKC. I can't think of his name right now.
Jalen Williams?
Yeah, the brother of Jalen Williams. Really good player. I know a lot of people are going to zero in on Alex Sarr, who, could be a projected, top 2 pick. He's a center, you guys. I don't really know how that fit would work personally with all the front court depth that you have with the Jalen Duren. I think if the Pistons do keep it, they will target a small forward in this draft, because if you do look at the top of the draft, there are a lot of great small forwards. But I think they will go for fit over best available. That's just my opinion, because they've gone for best available talent, and there has been question with fit. Yes. I think you have enough talent to where you can go for need.
Yes.
In my opinion. And I know that kind of sounds crazy when you're, guaranteed a top 6 pick, but that's just my opinion. If they have a top 3 pick, I think they keep it. If they're like 4, 5, 6, I think it's gone. I think they're calling teams. I know someone had mentioned Lauri Markkanen. I don't really know if Utah is really willing to sell on him
would love
yet.
that.
Brandon Ingram, that's a wish list thing for me, you guys. You know that. I think you're going to need more than just Ingram. You would need more than just this year's draft. You would probably need multiple first and probably Asar or Ivy or Dern or K to even get them to pick up the phone. I know he's a free agent in 2025, but they'll probably sell on him sooner than later if the Pelicans just have another collapse at the end of the season like they usually do. I think there are players out there. You know, a couple of months ago, I talked about the same topic with James Edwards. And he said, you're at 3 or 4. Are you trading for Jeremy Grant?
No.
Are you trading for? I was like, no, I just don't know. Not to say that this draft class is weak. I don't think it's weak. I think there's a lot of players similar to last year where they're plug and play players. Like you draft these guys, they're going to come in and contribute right away. I think that this draft class coming up is very similar to last year's in terms of these guys are probably going to be playing in the NBA for a good 5 to 7 years at the very minimum. But that's just my takeaway on it. I can understand your standpoint though, like trade it no matter what. Like we have enough young guys. Like what are we doing?
Yeah.
But it would be really hard for me to believe a talent evaluator like Troy Weaver passing on a top 3.
Oh yeah, no. Troy always wants to draft, especially because let's be real, that's probably one of the only things he's allowed to do in this group here that they got this collective brain trust. So. Yeah, Troy definitely probably wants to keep the pick, but again, I just think they're past that point. Like you said, fit. Is it possible that they do a little bit of a? I know it's more common in football. It doesn't happen as much in basketball, but like a trade back. Like if you are if you are a top 3 and you can move to like 8 or 9, still grab who you deem is like your guy, because like Troy. I've heard that Troy was his number 2 prospect in all of last draft, besides Wemby, obviously, was Asar. I don't know how true that is or not. But that's what I've heard from reliable sources that he was that high on Asar. So, but obviously Asar went 5th. So, like, if it's a situation where like your guy on the board, just like Jalen Duren, he had him as like one of his best prospects, and yet he was able to get him, you know. And near the back end of the lottery. So if it's one of those situations where you're looking at the guys that are projected 8, 9, 10, and you're like, that's the diamond in the rough, which historically almost every NBA draft has that, either late lottery or post lottery player that just breaks out. Like the NBA draft is such a crapshoot a lot of times. Then okay, I'm good with that. Move back to like 8, 9, 10, get a quality player and get who you deem as your guy. That would probably be like the most strategic and smart move, but it doesn't always happen in the draft. It doesn't really happen too often. Like it happens a lot more in the NFL than it does in the NBA. But I think it's something that Troy's probably considering and should consider. And that's one where I'd be totally okay with. I'm not anti-rookie, anti-draft, but I'm against. I don't want them to draft a player, but I necessarily like if he makes it, I have enough trust in Troy to be like, okay, let's give this guy a shot.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, that they had a chance to do that last year with Utah and Atlanta. I've talked to people that listen to this podcast. I mean, Utah was willing to trade us 2 future firsts to go up to 5. Obviously, we rejected it. Atlanta was willing to trade 15 in DeAndre Hunter for 5. We rejected it. Yeah. There's always been an avenue for the Pistons to trade down. I mean, if I'm Detroit and I don't want to slide out of the top 10, I would look at San Antonio. They currently have the 7th pick from a few years ago. I mean, maybe that's a team that you look at because, you know, they're projected right now to have 3 and 7. Obviously, we're going to have to wait for the draft lottery to see what happens there. But That's a team I would keep an eye on. And I think trading down is always another avenue because, you know, the lower you go down that lottery, the less money you're going to have to pay these rookies too. I mean, you have to think about it. If they're a top 5 pick, they're making $10 million at the end of the day. And I don't know, man. I think it'll be very interesting. My gut just tells me they will keep the pick. I would be very surprised if they traded it just based off of this organization and based off just the talent evaluation with Troy Weaver, because we had a very good second round pick this year, but Utah got it with the Simone Fontecchio trade. The only second round pick we have is a 55 from the Knicks. And that's our only other draft pick that we have. And I don't really think too many people are going to get excited about a prospect in the late 50s. Who knows if we even keep it, because we trade second round picks like they're nothing around here. But hey, you never really know. But did want to kind of just gauge your interest with the draft, because I know everyone has a different philosophy, but it's funny. I've asked 5 different people and you guys have all said the same thing. I'm trading that motherfucking thing.